I wanted to take a few minutes to go over the Louis XIV essay. So, excuse me. So I'm currently in Canvas and in the modules section. You can see if I scroll up, here's modules. I'm in the modules section. So if you scroll down, there's a module that says Louis XIV Essay Learning Module. Within that module is all the instructions that you'll need for the Louis XIV essay. So I'm going to click on the first one. This is the actual book information. So you need to purchase this book in order to complete this essay. This is the only book outside of your text that you're going to be allowed to use for this essay. I believe there are 1 or 2 copies available at Miramar's library. One of them I think you can check out for a few days. The other one is a reserved copy that has to stay in the library. So this is the book, and it is the only text outside of your textbook that you're allowed to use. So no other outside sources can be used in the essay. So I'm going to select next, and this is the essay prompt. So this is really the guidelines of the question you're supposed to be answering in this text, in this essay. So as you can see, let me scroll down a little bit. It says, I'll read it to you and we'll talk about it as we go. During his long reign of absolute power, Louis XIV became one of Europe's most famous and successful rulers. The Sun King's rule epitomized the development of absolutism. When historians study absolutism, they really will look at Louis XIV because he's the person who's able to do it, and many times without people understanding that he's actually being an absolute ruler. I love Louis XIV. I think that his reign has a lot of fascinating facts. A lot of things go on during his reign that he's able to control. So based on your reading of that book, Louis XIV and Absolutism, answer the following essay prompt. So here's the question that I want you to answer. It says, as a historian, you are to analyze how and why Louis XIV rose to gain near absolute power. How does he do it? This is the question you need to answer. How does Louis XIV become an absolute ruler? And you'll be using the primary source documents that are in that Louis XIV book that I'll talk about again in just a minute. So using that book, Louis XIV and Absolutism, including the primary source documents within it, you need to examine and evaluate the ways that Louis XIV demonstrated absolutism. So how does he do it is the question, but it's not just how to do it. Well, he controlled things. No, tell me exactly what did he do? And you're going to find that out through those primary sources. So in your analysis, be sure to evaluate Louis XIV's response to the problems of the Fronde, and you'll read about what the Fronde is in that text, to the building of Versailles, the palace that he builds, to economic difficulties in France, his response to nobility, how does he handle them to become this absolute ruler, and of course to the Protestants, and why does he have some things that he needs to take care of with the Protestants. So remember, this is not a summary of his reign or of the French Empire. It's not a book review. Your essay must include a thesis, an argument based on evidence. So I'm going to give you, something really silly. You might say Louis XIV became an absolute ruler in France because he wore white pants. But then you'd have to have primary sources to support how white pants allowed him to become an absolute ruler. How did he use those white pants? Why do they have so much power? Whatever. So obviously that's a very simple, silly argument. It's just to give you some idea of what you need to do. Your thesis always needs to have an how and a why to it. Cause and effect. You need to think about that the whole time that you're writing this essay. So in your answer, you need to use at least 4 primary sources from that Louis XIV text. They should support your argument. And as you use these primary sources in the essay, you need to explain why these particular documents stand out from the others. Now, I don't need you to say this document stands out from XYZ document because, but just explain what about that document really supports your argument. I want you to, on this particular thing, list the 4 primary sources that you use. Now, I'm not going to collect the instructions, but it's to give you a guideline. These are the ones that I use to ensure that you use 4 primary sources and that you understand why you use them. Now, in reality, you'll probably need to use more than 4. 4 would be like the bare minimum that you would probably use. You may use 6, you may use 8. You can use your textbook. You can use, there will be an assignment on Louis XIV that you'll be doing. You can use those sources, but nothing outside of the course. So you can't go to Wikipedia or Google Scholar or find another book. This is the only book. These are the only sources that you can use. All right, so here's some essay instructions. Be sure you read the documents, read the text, the book. It's not a book that you can pick up and read like a novel. It's not that kind of a book. The first, I don't know, I can't remember exactly without looking at the book here. Maybe the first section is maybe 20 pages, 25 pages. That's the introduction that the author, Beck, is giving you about Louis XIV. And then following that, there's a whole section just of documents. Before each document, Beck will also explain the documents, put it in context for you. That introduction before the documents is not considered part of the primary source. Remember, what is a primary source? Something that is written or created during that particular time period that you're writing about or studying. So during the reign of Louis XIV. All right, so you should have a thesis statement, of course, and I want you to really think about this thesis statement. Be very careful not to just restate the essay prompt. You need to include in there your argument. He had white pants. Those white pants gave him power because people, whatever, were afraid of white pants. Your thesis statement is not just one sentence once you get into kind of these complex conversations. It could be 2 sentences, no more than 2 or 3. Because you should be able to write it a little concise, but it doesn't have to be 1 sentence at the very end of the first paragraph. It could be within the first 2 paragraphs. Just make sure that you highlight the thesis sentence so I know, or thesis sentences, so I know what you think your thesis is and what I am going to expect to be reading what your argument is as I go through your essay. Okay, be sure to answer every part of the prompt. Remember those parts up here? Be sure to explain his response to the Fronde, to this building of Versailles, to economic difficulties, to the nobility, and to the Protestants. You need to work through all of those things, all of those questions. To avoid overlooking a question, it may help you to use that prompt to organize your essay. Maybe, when you're making your outline, that's 1 point in your outline. Each one of those things are 1 point in your outline. Be sure to think for yourself. I think you all have the ability to do this. I've had similar essays in various courses, and I haven't not been able to understand it and create some essay, and I think you all can do it as well. Just remember, use your own words. This is not a research paper. It is a thesis with an argument. Excuse me, an essay with argument. The Western Civ text and the readings on Canvas are the only source outside of that book, Louis XIV, that you're allowed to consult. Do not use outside sources. If you do, you will receive 0 points. You need to prove your point. Use evidence to make your arguments. Be sure to make specific reference and cite examples from your readings. You are going to be using Chicago-style citations, which is specific to history. History does not use MLA. If you use MLA or any other citation style, you will receive a 10-point deduction. If you don't have any citations or your citations are not valid citations, your essay will receive 0 points. Remember, a citation should include the book name, the primary source name, the author's name, the page number. It needs to be very, very specific. The idea of a citation is so that when the person is reading it, in this case me, when your instructor's reading it, I can go directly to that book, that page, that paragraph, whatever it is, and find exactly the area that you're talking about. So make sure that you have citations. Scroll down as you will probably be using some quotes. Limit your quotes to 1 or 2 sentences. I do not want long quotes in this essay because the goal is to use your own words. And you should always analyze quotes before you even use them. So don't use drop quotes. A drop quote is where you say, Louis XIV said, and you just drop it in there without any explanation. You should have at least a sentence or 2 explaining what your thoughts are, what your argument is about that particular quote that you're going to then introduce. And then the quote is supporting to your analysis. It's not the other way around. You don't put the quote in and expect the reader to do the analysis, or put the quote in and do the analysis. The analysis comes first, and the quote is the supporting information. Make sure that you don't use drop quotes. You'll receive some deductions for that if you do. But I really want you to use your own words as much as possible. Remember, you have to cite when you quote, but you also have to cite when you paraphrase information. Anytime you're using thoughts or ideas that are not your own, you need to cite. Okay? Next, avoid personal sentiments. So this is not your opinion. You shouldn't have anywhere in your essay says, I feel that, I think that, I believe that. Don't use first person. Remember, you're making an argument based on evidence. So this is not a summary. If you do create a summary or a book review, depending on the academic quality essay, you could receive 50% or less or zero. So just use the evidence to support your argument. For example, you might say Louis XIV was able to gain absolute power because he wore white pants that scared everyone. Not rather than saying, I believe that Louis XIV wore white pants because it scared everyone. If you have a trouble leaving out the I thinks, I feel, I believes, then write it down that way and then scratch out everything I think that, or I believe that, or I feel that. Scratch that out and just leave the rest of the sentence. And that's a really good way for you to avoid using personal opinions. All right, so make sure that you write clearly and carefully. There's no excuse for poor grammar or punctuation or poor spelling. It's just, students being, or anybody, grad students, instructors, whoever, not taking care in creating their documents. You can also go to the Academic Success Center before you submit your final version and get some help there. There's ways in Microsoft Word to do grammar check and spell check. If you don't know how to do that, go on YouTube and find a video. They're all over the place. Write in the style you know. What that means is oftentimes students try to write at a higher level than they normally write, or try to use words they don't really understand the meanings for, or they use a thesaurus to try to find words, bigger words, or more more important sounding words. Be careful. Just write what you know. Write in the style that you know. As you go throughout your college career, your writing will get better and better and better. There's no harm in trying to improve your writing. I'm not saying don't improve your writing. I'm just saying don't go to the extreme where your writing really isn't you anymore, because your voice won't come across and it will appear very disjointed and unclear. It's just common that that's what happens. So avoid the use of pronouns. Pronouns he, she, they, them, he, her, I, you, we, us. Try to stay away from pronouns. For things like we or us or they or them, use whatever it is. Historians, researchers, the French, Americans, whatever. Just use the title of who they are. Stay away from he, she's, they, and them, because what happens is oftentimes their pronouns are used incorrectly. And in history, what that means is you could technically rewrite history. For me as the grader, however you write it is how I'm going to read it. So if you rewrite history incorrectly, then I don't know that you actually really know the truth, or that you know the true history. And so I can only grade you based on the information that you give me. Just keep using, if you want to use Louis XIV, King Louis XIV, Europeans, French, whatever, that's okay. If you're not sure. And what you can do is, if you find yourself using a lot of pronouns, go back, circle each pronoun, and think about who you're talking about. And is it really clear who you're talking about? Now remember, the pronoun, whatever pronoun you use, refers to the last person, event, whatever, that you mentioned by name. So if you say Louis XIV loved King Henry VIII, and then you say he tried to take over France, the he now refers to Henry VIII, not to Louis XIV. So be very careful. And if you're not sure about that, there's lots of tutorials on using pronouns also. History, is written in past tense. So make sure that that you're writing in past tense. Everything pretty much in this essay, there are times when you're writing in present tense. If you're writing about Beck, who is the historian, please call him a historian, by the way. You might, in that case, you might say that Beck said or Beck says, because he's still alive. So, and it's pretty current. So you could use him in the present tense, but everything else in regards to France, Louis XIV, any of the folks in that area, era, are all in past tense. Okay. So the essay needs to be 5 to 6 full pages. And what that means is 5 full pages. Anything below 5 full pages, you'll receive a penalty. So don't give me 4.5 pages. I want 5 full pages. You really need to have close to 6 pages to answer this and complete this essay thoroughly. 12-point font, 1-inch margins, Chicago style, and don't play around with the margins, 1 1/4, 1.5. When I'm grading like 100 of these essays, even the slightest difference in the size of the font from 12-point font to 13 font, or 1-inch margins to 1 1/4-inch margins, it's so obvious. All I'm going to do is pull it out. I'm going to reformat it in the correct font, the correct margins, and see where your essay lands as far as style and length. Okay. If you go to the Academic Success Center, you can earn 10% extra credit on your essay. So what that means is, say for example, so this is on your earned grade. If you say had an essay that was, if you would have turned it in as is, a C, a mid C at 75%, but you go to the Academic Success Center, then you'll get an extra 7.5, which would make your grade from a C to a B. Now, if you went there and you had a 75% essay and they helped you, organize it, or, check some of that grammar and spelling, worked on your thesis statement, and it said a 75, now you have an 85 essay before you turn it in, and then you turn it in and you get another 8.5. You went from a C paper to an A paper. So it's really, it's good to go to the Academic Success Center. Now when you go to the Academic Success Center, you check it at the front desk. At Miramar, the Academic Success Center is on the first floor of the library building on the left-hand side. You check it in the front desk, and if you only want help with your writing, ask to work with a writing tutor. And then we have an English center that they'll actually send you to. You can go work with a writing tutor, but it's really up to you. All right, so all of the documents submitted in Canvas, all these essays go through what's called UniCheck. It's the campus's plagiarism checklist software. It's very sophisticated, so be very careful. Use your own words. Just use your own words and cite. Simple. You don't have to worry about plagiarism. Use your own words and cite, and you'll be okay. If you say, for example, you're running out of time, you had to work the night before, whatever, and you need to turn your essay in late, rather than freaking out and turning in a plagiarized essay, just turn your essay in late. You lose 10 points for every 24-hour period or portion thereof. If it's due on a Saturday at midnight and you turn it in Sunday at noon, you're going to lose 10 points. But better to lose 10 points off of a good essay than receive 0 points for a plagiarized essay and then have to go through, student affairs and deal with that. All right, so that's what I want to talk to you as far as the essay instructions. The next thing I want to show you, let me scroll down here a little bit, is the essay rubric. And here's the essay rubric. So I want you to spend some time kind of reviewing this rubric. You will receive up to 25 points depending on the level of your content. 20 points, how well did you address the prompt question. Up to 5 points, is your thesis clear? Your use of primary sources, up to 10 points. Do you have enough evidence to support whatever your argument is? Are your quotes fully introduced and the description of the quotes relation to the argument and context is accurately described? Up to 5 points. Organization, is it clear? Is it logical? Make sure that it makes some sense. You can't talk about building of Versailles until you talk about who Louis XIV is. The style and voice, up to 5 points. Grammar mechanics, 5 points. And then, of course, your citations up to 10 points. So all this adds up to 100 points. So be careful. If you lose 2 or 3 points here, 2 or 3 points there, pretty soon you're down a whole grade. I always suggest to students to take this rubric before you submit your draft. Even go over this rubric and see where you might score on your draft. And then fix things before you submit the final version. And then once you have what you think is your final version, take this rubric and score yourself again. And if you find yourself over here someplace, maybe you need to fix those things before you submit your draft. So this is how you're going to be graded, so make sure you figure that out. A couple of notes. Essays that have less than 5 full pages will receive a 15-point deduction for each page or partial page below the 5 pages. And the reason why I do that is because I know it's going to take you a minimum of 5 pages to do an okay job. 6 pages will get you a good job. If you find yourself going over 6 pages, that's fine. I mean, I don't want a 10-page essay because by then you're just telling me stuff that you don't need to tell me. But if you're, 5.5 or 6 pages, 6.5 pages, I mean, that's okay. If your paper shows an incomplete paper or doesn't meet the requirements or just shows that you really didn't put any effort into it, or even if you didn't understand the topic, then you could get 50% or less. So you can write 5 pages of nothing, and you're not going to get a full credit for it. All right, and then of course you have to have citations. So your citations have to be legitimate, valid citations. And what that means is when I look at it, I should be able to find exactly the book, the document, the primary source you're talking about, and the page number exactly. If you're paraphrasing, some general information about Louis XIV on a paragraph, well, at the very most, you should have maybe a 2-page range, and that's it. No more than 2 pages. If you have to split up your citations, put 1 or 2 citations within that paraphrased information. If you have citations where it doesn't have page numbers or it doesn't have document names or authors' names or book names, those are considered invalid citations. And also remember, if you make up citations, that is academic dishonesty, so make sure that your citations are accurate and correct and true citations. Also be careful with plagiarism. Sometimes students copy and paste. You're not allowed to do that. You can add quotes in from the text, but then again, you have to cite them and introduce them. If for some reason there is some plagiarism that happens, of course, it's reported to Student Affairs for disciplinary action. The college takes plagiarism very seriously. If you feel like you need to submit a plagiarized paper, I would highly, highly, highly suggest that you just don't submit your paper or you submit it late. Because if you plagiarize a course, then you have to, write a report. It goes to the Dean of Student Affairs. You have to go talk to the dean. It goes on your transcript. So there are some consequences for doing that. All right. So if you have any questions about the rubric, about the essay instructions, please make sure that you either come visit me at my office hours or send me an email. So the next thing in this folder is how to set your paper up in Chicago style. Many of you don't know Chicago style, and this may be the first time you approach it. It's really easy to do in Microsoft Word. This is a video from YouTube that explains it pretty easily. The next one is if you use Google Docs, this is a way to show you how to convert your Google Doc to a PDF, which will allow you to upload it to Canvas. Because Canvas doesn't take Google Docs forms. And so if you submit in Google Docs and I can't open it, then it's just as if you didn't do it. Here's a checklist. This is for your benefit. It just kind of goes through some things that you should be looking at as you're preparing your essay, or before you submit it, at the very least, you should go through this checklist. And if there's anything missing, then of course you should make sure you fix it. As far as this down here where it says, is it complete and stapled to the back of your essay, you don't need to submit the rubric online. This is for on-campus instructions. All right, so the next thing in here is the draft submission. The draft is the first thing that you're going to submit. So make sure that you go through the draft instructions. The draft doesn't have to be the full 6 pages. It can be up to 4 pages, and here's some other things. And your draft is going to be due on November 16th, so about 2 weeks from yesterday. All right, so I'm going to end the video here. I'll come back and talk to you again about the essay as we get closer to the due date.